midnight screams.
Horror, brutality, the supernatural, and mystery. These are the pillars of any truly compelling story from the SCP Foundation. It is rare for all these elements to converge at once. It is rarer still when they are rooted in actual historical events. SCP-4007 is one such document. To be precise, it is a depiction of the Imperial Japanese Army, its massacres, and the Second World War, in a universe where these horrors are amplified by the existence of the SCP Foundation. This file is recorded in a timeline where the SCP Foundation held little influence over pre-Meiji Japan. Instead, the primary agency overseeing anomalous activities and supernatural phenomena here was the Imperial Japanese Anomalous Matters Examination Agency, or IJAMEA. In a way, this agency was a product of Japan's Meiji-era modernization programs, specializing in the supernatural. However, this older agency's methods were often dismissed by the Japanese state as archaic. Compared to the Foundation, IJAMEA often referred to anomalous threats as magic and leaned towards the spiritual, lacking the cold professionalism of the Foundation. Consequently, the ruling political oligarchies of Japan reformed IJAMEA into something new. After its reformation, the agency learned to leverage science effectively, becoming a symbol of a modernized Japan. With the looming threat of World War II, and with no intervention from the SCP Foundation, IJMEA began a frantic search for any and all materials related to anomalous entities and phenomena throughout Japan. Every temple, tomb, library, and private collection across the nation was scoured for any noteworthy knowledge of the supernatural, all in service of the war effort. This inadvertently led to the creation of the Special Autonomous Battalion, more commonly known as the Yukai Battalion. The Yukai Battalion was largely composed of anomalous entities and, at its peak, numbered as many as 500 soldiers. Notably, multiple reports confirmed the existence of non-human personnel serving in various roles throughout the war. SCP-4007 is the collective designation the SCP Foundation uses for 5 soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army. These 5 were the result of a Special Forces initiative, similar to the Yukai Battalion, but they were created specifically to serve Japan's Unit 731, it must be said. Unit 731 was a very real historical unit, responsible for Japan's biological and chemical warfare development, infamous for its human experimentation and vivisections. That alone is monstrous. But for the SCP Foundation to assign a unique classification to 5 anomalously powered soldiers, this was no laughing matter. Because the 5 individuals designated SCP-4007 continuously acquired different abilities throughout the course of the Second World War. Though each of them differed in their anomalous abilities, all instances of 4007 shared several traits: extended longevity, heightened reflexes, enhanced senses, and formidable physical health. Another commonality was that all 5 were unwilling to accept the end of World War II. This, too, is a real phenomenon that occurred among Japanese holdouts. SCP-4007 was originally a project by IJMEA to create a special type of soldier, one who could combine the capabilities of espionage and infiltration with all the powers of the Yukai Battalion. allowing them to operate in hazardous environments deep within enemy territory. They were to be used to complete exceedingly difficult missions for the Imperial Army, even when operating alone. Throughout the war, SCP-4007 fought on nearly every major front opened by the Imperial Japanese Army. Though they operated primarily within the territory of the Republic of China, the presence of the five, known as SCP-4007, was so notorious they earned an unofficial moniker, the Fivefold Screen. By 1945, SCP-4007 was ordered to fall back to aid in the defense of Japan. However, they may have been given a new mission shortly after, as the locations where the Foundation eventually found them were illogical. Despite their orders to defend Japan, none of the five were anywhere near their homeland. Now, we will learn exactly who SCP-4007 were, what they could do, and how they interacted with the SCP Foundation. The first of the five was Inazuma, meaning lightning. Inazuma was the nominal commander of the unit. He could generate high-intensity electrical bolts and was deployed across the Burmese front during the war. Inazuma made his last stand after single-handedly eliminating over 500 soldiers in Burma, a number that does not include civilians. The situation escalated so severely that the Foundation assigned a specialized task force with the sole purpose of killing the five known as SCP-4007. After being hunted down, Inazuma attempted to start a forest fire to create an escape route. He was ultimately trapped within that same forest and died of smoke inhalation. The incident was deemed an acceptable outcome by the SCP Foundation. 1 down, 4 to go. The second was Oni, the ogre. His skin possessed an incredible resistance to damage, allowing him to take a direct hit from a handgun without any issue. He was found on the island of Luzon in the Philippines. When discovered by the Foundation's task force, the team suffered heavy casualties. Oni wiped out half their number before the Foundation could call in an airstrike. Oni was found dead, killed by a massive electrical shock. Strangely, the Foundation still deemed this an acceptable outcome. I'm seeing a pattern here, and I don't like it one bit. Both men died indirectly, and the Foundation consistently marked it as an acceptable outcome. I will explain why in a moment. The third bore the codename Kitsune, the Fox. Kitsune possessed a mimetic ability, capable of compelling anyone who heard his voice to believe anything he said. He was discovered in China by the Foundation but quickly escaped and remained in hiding for 9 years. After years of tracking, the Foundation was able to pinpoint Kitsune's location to a district in southern China. But upon arrival, Kitsune was found dead, having been strangled. Several spent casings and flattened bullets were scattered nearby, indicating that Kitsune had fired repeatedly at something. Who Kitsune was trying to shoot, or who killed him, could not be determined. As you might have guessed, the Foundation once again deemed this an acceptable outcome. 3 down, 2 to go. Kamori, Smoke, was an individual with the seemingly basic ability to become invisible, including any items on his person such as clothing and equipment. He is the first one the Foundation successfully captured and who remains alive to this day. Unlike his comrades, Kamori was willing to cooperate with the Foundation in the containment of the remaining members. Following negotiations with the entity, an agreement was reached. He would be granted certain limited freedoms in exchange for information regarding SCP-4007 and would assist in their capture. Kimori would be permitted to reside in his private home in Malaysia under Foundation surveillance. It was Kimori who provided most of the information for the SCP-4007 file. All previous documentation on them had been destroyed due to its horrific nature. So, what was this horror? Kimori revealed that in 1935, Unit 731, under the banner of medical research, conducted experiments in biological weaponry and human vivisection. These were typically performed on Chinese civilians, prisoners of war, or other inmates. It was during this time that Unit 731 also discovered the existence of anomalous individuals or people with supernatural abilities. This was the genesis of what was called Project Shinka, which translates to deification. In it, the commander of Unit 731 stated that they must unravel the splendors of the supernatural. He argued that those with powers did not know how to properly use their God-given gifts. To protect the homeland, the unit would strip the power from others and claim it for themselves. This was the first step in a large-scale abduction campaign targeting anomalous individuals in territories occupied by the Empire of Japan, all to be used for Unit 731's inhumane research. These people were subjected to live vivisections without anesthesia to remove their organs. In some cases, limbs were amputated to see if these parts could function outside the host. Forced breeding among the test subjects was also conducted, due to the rarity of those with anomalous abilities. In a way, this project itself was a genocide, wiping out most of the anomalous population across East Asia. The next phase of the project began when Aijamiya started implanting these organs and body parts into soldiers of the Japanese army, hoping to grant them anomalous or supernatural abilities. As expected, the majority of the recipients did not survive or could not control their newfound powers. Among them, only 5 individuals survived the process. These 5 were SCP-4007. But why? Why was SCP-4007, the fivefold screen, not defending Japan? That was what puzzled the SCP Foundation. During one interrogation, Komori, the 4th member, explained that he served the Emperor in Japan. He believed the reason he received this gift was to serve in the war. At that time, they had to use everything they had to protect their country. When you're in a very nasty war, you have to use very nasty weapons. And sometimes you have to use people as ammunition for those weapons. Even then, weapons alone aren't enough. Komori suddenly insisted that his brothers must be stopped before it was too late. His orders were to remain here, in this stinking, humid jungle. The Foundation questioned him, asking if he truly knew why. Why did Komori need to be in Malaysia while they were being relentlessly attacked on all fronts? Surely, there were more important objectives. To this question, Komori only replied that something had happened near the end of the war. Something more urgent than World War II itself. He said that anomalous weaponry was too difficult to control, and it seemed they had made a mistake. That mistake had cost them the 5th Southern Expeditionary Fleet, a fleet that does not exist in any historical record. And that was why Komori needed to hold his position and carry out his orders at all costs. The SCP Foundation had no idea what those orders were, why, or if he was even telling the truth. Now, we come to the last one. Bakemono, the shapeshifter. The 5th member could alter his physical appearance at will, and it remains unclear if this ability has any limits, as the Foundation has never encountered Bakemono directly. Camry stated that this person rarely operated with the other members. He knew nothing of his whereabouts. We have a mountain of questions, and not a single answer. That is, until they found a paper document from the World War II era from the SCP Foundation itself. And that document was codenamed SCP-4007, Class Keter. SCP-4007 is currently uncontained, and all efforts to apprehend SCP-4007 are to be conducted by Mobile Task Force 55. SCP-4007 is to be captured alive, as he holds significant information regarding the development of anomalous weaponry by the Japanese Army. SCP-4007 is Komori, with a description matching the current version, but the entry date is a year earlier, and his designation number is 1, not 4. This document revealed that Komori was the first one found by the Foundation, not Lightning. Clearly, something was interfering, and this was surely no coincidence. Why was Komori's designation out of order? It was highly probable that their information had been compromised by Komori himself. The Foundation had underestimated SCP-4007's anomalous abilities. Komori, Smoke, was thought to have the power of invisibility. The truth was more than that. SCP-4007 is not capable of invisibility. He cannot disappear. His ability has nothing to do with sight. It has to do with the mind. The individual designated SCP-4007, Komori, is an anti-meme. Komori can erase the perception of himself from an observer's mind. He can also customize this effect, making it extremely selective. Like a scalpel, it excises only the necessary details, leaving the rest of the memory intact, undisturbed. Komori, in short, has the ability to make others forget exactly what he wants them to forget. Nothing more, nothing less. And this entire time, he had done just that, removing the perception of himself from observers' memories, making them believe he was invisible. With ordinary anti-memes, the Foundation would have detected the blatant information gap left behind. But Komori could influence every aspect of their memory, and thus the written records. But cameras are not minds. They only discovered this ability when they viewed Komori through a thermal imaging camera. This meant that anyone on the research team who had ever known Komori had their memories altered. Many of them had their memories erased at different times, patched together so crudely that they misremembered most of the details concerning him. Why did he do all this? To what end? More importantly, what else had they forgotten about SCP-4007? The answer was yes. The archival department scoured the paper records and found a document about Komori's 3 comrades who had been unintentionally killed by the Foundation. Their information matched the current version, but each entry for Inazuma, Oni, and Kitsune had a single passage removed. It was that all 3 were missing their internal organs. Now, everything was clear. Komori had used his ability to erase the most crucial line of information from the reports of all 3 deaths. Komori began with Inazuma, Lightning, by causing him to suffocate on smoke. Then, he transplanted Inazuma's organs into himself, stealing his electrical powers. His next target was Oni. Using Inazuma's power of lightning, he could easily defeat Oni. And in the same manner, he used Oni's organs to further empower himself. And finally, Kitsune. The clue was that Kitsune had fired at something multiple times, with the bullets being flattened, suggesting the target was completely immune to conventional firearms, a description that matched the abilities of Oni, whose powers Kemuri had absorbed. With this final step, Kemuri was able to combine his own ability with Kitsune's manipulation to erase a single line from the documents, that all three were missing their organs. This had left a Foundation completely baffled. Essentially, Kemuri, the one person willing to cooperate with the SCP Foundation, had slowly killed the other three, absorbed their abilities, and then manipulated the Foundation into thinking he was completely innocent. The question that remains is still, why? The Foundation began to re-examine the locations of the SCP-4007 members. None of the 5 had chosen a defensive position near Japan. When they took a pen and connected all the points where they had encountered 4 members of SCP-4007, a shape emerged. This was clearly not a coincidence. A pentagon, or more specifically, a 5-pointed star, is a common shape in the channeling of magical energy. They are often used as a component in summoning or sealing rituals, meant to contain something within. SCP-4007, the 5-fold screen, were 5 pillars used to contain something massive. This, of course, led to one crucial question. What was the Japanese army trying to contain? An expedition to the center of the pentagram was launched. The center was located off the coast of Vietnam. They found countless metal scraps and remnants of ship hulls scattered across the seabed. One piece bore the inscription Umigiri and the flag of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Along with it were the wrecks of destroyers with names that never existed. An entire sunken fleet with too many ships to count. Beneath them lay countless buried skeletons, an entire seabed covered in remains, most still clad in the uniforms of the Imperial Japanese Army. Most disturbingly, these ships had not been bombed or shelled. They weren't sunk. There was no sign of mechanical failure, no scorch marks, not even a trace of an explosion. Something had submerged the entire fleet. One ship was nearly torn in half, as if ripped apart. Something enormous had destroyed an entire naval armada. The size of this pentagram told the Foundation 2 critical things. First, whatever the Japanese army was trying to contain had to be extremely large. Second, the ritual must consume a colossal amount of energy to maintain. Alarmingly, this barrier had been maintained for half a century. Rituals of this type typically cannot last that long. After a certain point, they become too worn and eventually fail. Finally, the Foundation realized they had been completely deceived and manipulated by Kemuri. He was trying to make the Foundation believe he was helping them. In reality, he was just using the Foundation to track down the remaining members, and once found, Kemuri would kill them, take their powers, and then erase the memories of the SCP Foundation staff. The current containment procedure is that Kemuri must be convinced the Foundation is still actively assisting him in finding the 5th member. He must believe their agreement is still in effect. They found a letter of unknown context, written by Kemuri to an unidentified person. My brother, forgive me for not writing sooner. After Takashi's death, I needed more time alone to reflect and regain my strength. In the end, he could not see my way, just like Mitsuo, But it is not too late for you to see the truth, my brother. It will escape. I am sure of it. No matter what we do, no prayer or ritual will stop it from carrying out its terrible purpose. Therefore, as your comrade, I write this to ask you to reconsider your move. We must fight it, on our own terms. The longer we wait, the stronger it grows, until the sleeping giant becomes truly invincible. That is our mission. As loyal soldiers, we must act while we still can. If we strike the moment the ritual is broken, we will have the best chance to stop it once and for all. There is no other way. It was too late for Mitsuo and Takashi to see the truth while they lived, but I have hope for you. I will stop it with your help, one way or another. How you help is your choice. Project Deification was never meant to be used against Allied forces or to protect Japan. SCP-4007 was a force created to fight something on a completely different level. Something that could sink an entire fleet in the blink of an eye. A creature that no weapon could defeat. Kamari believes the barrier can only delay this thing. He insists that the 5 of them fighting it directly is the only right course of action. Kamari will do this with his comrades, or he will sacrifice them so that he can stop it alone. Now, the SCP Foundation is searching for the 5th member, as well as finding replacements for the other 4 with enough power to maintain the barrier. If they fail, they will have to devote all their resources to preparing for the release of the entity trapped within, or choose to join forces with the Shadow Warrior to repel the threat once and for all. The forest made a copy of me. It wants the original dead. I've always loved hiking in forests. They're the only places where my mind feels at peace. There's one close to my city I've wanted to explore for a while. It's secluded, barely any trails or campsites, just tall pine trees. On Friday morning, I drove to the nearest parking lot. There was a small path going between the trees, leading along the forest floor. There was dirt, moss, and pine needles beneath my feet. Every step felt like the forest was swallowing my footprints. When I put up my tent that evening, dark clouds formed over my head. Soon, heavy raindrops poured down from the sky. When I lay down that night, it felt like my whole body was drowning in mud. My mind was drifting off to sleep when I heard a strange noise outside my tent. It sounded like a person trying to speak. Their voice was damp and thick. I shone my flashlight. No shadows around the tent. I decided to open it and have a quick look around. But nothing was out there. I felt creeped out. I had heard strange sounds in the forest before, but this sounded too human, too real. I could barely sleep that night. The rain banging on my tent woke me up the next morning. I quickly packed up my things, trying to make sure everything got as little wet as possible. The sky poured all day. The mud was sticking hard to my shoes. The forest was dead silent. Only the sound of raindrops falling on the ground echoed through it. I was walking back to my car when lightning struck the path I was on. The whole forest lit up with a flash of bright white light. I had to put my hand in front of my eyes. When I put it down, I saw mud in front of me, bubbling vigorously as if heated from below. The mud started mushing together, slowly building height. It began to shape into a frame of legs, torso, and arms. Then, an outline of a head with long hair hanging behind it formed. Something about that shape seemed familiar. Another lightning strike, and the thing began to change color, its brown muddiness slowly turning into a pale skin-like tone, nails slowly growing on the tips of its fingers. 2 holes formed in the outline of its head, where blue eyes slowly rolled in from the back, then a nose, ears, and lips formed on it. The lips opened, mud fell out of them, and in its place a row of pearly white teeth showed. The creature then looked at me and flashed an unnaturally wide grin, with its eyes piercing mine. My whole body was frozen, and my heart was pounding hard inside my chest. My knees were weak, my arms were shaking. There was a strange metallic taste in my mouth. I couldn't take my eyes off it. The creature tried to speak. At first, it sounded like a few inaudible mumblings, but as more mud fell from its mouth, it turned into something resembling words. It sounded human, strange but human, like a person trying to speak with water in their mouth. I soon realized that the thing standing in front of me was me. "Hi, Sally," uttering my name in its damp, muddy voice. The sound of that pierced through me and unfroze my body. I immediately turned around, threw my stuff on the ground, and started running away. My ears were ringing. My vision was blurred. I could hear the creature's feet splashing in the mud, getting closer and closer. Then I felt one of its hands gripping mine. I tried to wrestle out, but the creature was too strong. It threw me to the ground, mounted me, and put its hands on my neck. Its palms and fingers felt cold and wet. The creature smelled earthy, humid, and rotten like a swamp after a heavy rain. I tried to scramble out from under it, but the creature was too strong. My hand started frantically searching on the forest floor when it finally stumbled on what felt like a rock. I didn't hesitate and struck it over the head. It fell to the ground, and mud began to pour from the place I struck. It slowly began to bubble and clot, like human blood. I took off running again, sprinting through the forest. I found a small rock opening beneath one of the hills. I'm hiding there right now. My heart is pounding. I can't catch my breath. My whole body is shaking. I can hear its voice. "Sally." That damp and muddy screech is getting closer. "Please, if anyone is near, call for help. I can't make a sound. If I speak, the creature will know exactly where I am." I moved into my house about 4 months ago, finally having settled in completely. I had all boxes dumped, shelves and bed frames assembled, and finished with 2 orders of brand new unwrapped furniture that brought the living room and basement to life. It's a decent-sized 3-bedroom house that only me and my husky occupy for now. I would say to her, "We're manifesting a family, Bree. This is all for them, nice and ready to go." I am 27 years old, with a good job and credit score that was pre-built by the foresight of my father when I was 21. I had nothing to complain about, nothing, and nothing to feel sad about. But the emptiness of the house hung on me. I knew it wouldn't be a complete until I had the family I dreamed of. To ensure everything stayed intact when I left the house for work, I put Bree in the backyard. It was comfortable for her, with a little doggy house and toys scattered across the yard. Hopefully that would keep her from getting bored by herself and bothering the neighbors. Yet every day, I came home from work to her. She's sitting almost directly center in the backyard, unmoving, her toys virtually untouched. I was unnerved, yet maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe she simply was putting the toys back in the same area each time. One day, I returned home late to her, staring directly at me through the sliding glass door, unblinking, as if she knew I would arrive soon. "Come on, Bree. Snacks. We can watch episodes of Twilight Zone until I'm asleep," I said, opening the door. But Bree didn't budge from her spot. I watched as she rotated her head in a diagonal motion, gave me a low groan, and lay down with her paws placed in front of her. On her face was a look of tiredness, maybe sadness. I couldn't quite place it as I walked towards her. What's wrong? Your stomach's hurting from too much food, or what, girl? I rubbed her head and she stretched out on her side, still situated in the center of the Seven-Nation. Backyard. You can't stay out here all day, Bree. I picked her up and carried her towards the sliding door. She glanced up at me for a moment before returning to her state of inactivity. Don't be lazy, Bree. I put her down inside and she finally moved, shuffling off for a drink. Food ready, I turned the TV on and patted the couch for Bree to come. She looked out the sliding glass door for a moment before making her way to me. Instead of her hopping up on the couch as usual, she aggressively nudged my leg with an even louder groan and jogged back around to the sliding door, pawing at the bottom. Bree, what has gotten into you? Come here and sit down now. You've had plenty of time to play outside today. Finally ambling over, she sat and we watched the Twilight Zone until we both fell asleep. In the morning, I woke up on the couch to TV static from the finished tape recording. Bree was up already, staring through the glass door. I was completely weirded out at this point, but work was in 45 minutes. I gave up and let her back. You really like that backyard, don't you? She ran out into the yard and started running in circles over and over again. I let her be and went to the bathroom to shower before work. The shower was long, but by the time I came back out, I felt refreshed and ready for a new day. I went to go say goodbye to Bree and was welcomed by a disaster. Holes dug up in the ground all across the backyard. I clenched my teeth and analyzed them one by one, infuriated. Bree, this was so unlike her and was going to make my day longer than I wanted it to be. Why did you do this? As I let out a very long sigh, I noticed that there was one hole much bigger than the others, almost 3 times as wide as the next largest. Bree was running around in circles as if she hadn't just cost me a few hours of labor. I wiped the sweat off my forehead and thought for a minute, breathing in and out slowly to calm myself down. Bree finally noticed me and halted the circling. She jumped over to the large hole and stood behind it, barking and howling loudly. Bree, be quiet. You'll disturb the neighbors. She didn't stop, so I walked over impatiently towards the hole she was standing behind, trying to ignore her obnoxiously loud howls. I finally reached the edge of the hole and peered down to the bottom. My heart sank in disbelief. Inside the hole was a small rusted copper knob and a slight view of metal behind it. Bree's howling suddenly sent a chill down my spine, and my feet felt glued to the ground. I knew the layout of this property from top to bottom, and there wasn't supposed to be anything under this house besides the basement. Finally wrenching my feet from the spot, I rushed to the house to call off of work, making up a story about my dog falling extremely ill and needing to be taken to the vet. They accepted my story without question. I went inside my garage to grab a shovel and began digging. Warning, check your back seat. I wasn't worried about the message when it first popped up. It's one of those things they put in these days to make sure no one leaves a child in a hot car, I guess. It hadn't ever shown me that warning before, but I figured maybe a passenger had left a purse on the floor or something and it was detecting the weight. There wasn't anything there, though. I looked under the seats and everything. Even ran my hands along the back edge to see if there was a wallet or phone stuck in the crack. I didn't think that sort of thing would set off the alarm, but the car was still fairly new, so I couldn't be sure. Regardless, nothing was there. I'd forgotten about it by the end of the next day, honestly. But when I pulled into my driveway and turned off the car, there it was again on my dashboard. I checked the back seat again. Still nothing. I hadn't had any messages from passengers looking for any lost items either. Maybe this was just a thing the car did? Just a general warning to remind drivers to check the back seat every time they got out. If so, it felt counterproductive. If the warning was there every time, people were bound to start ignoring it. It would just become part of the background. Also, I was sure that the car hadn't been doing this for the first several months I'd had it. On the other hand, this was the sort of change they might have pushed through a software update. There could have been some new legislation, some lobbying group pushing to have this warning on permanently, like the meaningless parental advisory stickers on music. I looked online that night, searching through car forums and news posts for any mention of this warning. I couldn't find any indication that it was supposed to be happening every time I turned the car off. In fact, it didn't seem to be showing up for anyone else. This problem was only in my car. Clearly, it was just a bad sensor. It was probably still under warranty, but in order to get it fixed, I'd still have to leave it at the dealership for a day, and the warranty wasn't going to pay my lost income for the day off. I told myself I could just ignore it. It was just a single line of text. I'd stop noticing it in no time. I was wrong. Every time I turned the car off, that message glared at me like a dire omen. I found myself obsessively checking the back seat every time I got out, even though I knew I'd find nothing. I vacuumed the car until not so much as a crumb remained. I checked the seatbelt latches. Everything was perfect, but the warning still appeared. I tried ignoring it. I averted my eyes when I turned the car off, but I could feel it glowing from the deactivated dash, see the phantom words printed across the darkness of my eyelids. I walked away from the car without looking in the back, telling myself that it was a waste of time and there was nothing to find. I knew I was right, of course, but I found myself wide awake at 3. In the morning, staring at the ceiling and thinking, what if? I ended up kneeling in the street, in my pajamas, with my phone flashlight on, looking under the seats for something I knew wouldn't be there. The back seat was as empty as always. The warning haunted me constantly. I only saw it when I stopped the car, but I knew it was always coming. I began to watch the back seat constantly, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror more than was safe or reasonable. My passengers noticed. My rating began to dip, with notes marking concerns about attentiveness to the road. My tips suffered as well. Finally, I bit the bullet and took the car in to get the sensor fixed. The warning mocked me as I parked it in the lot, daring me to go inside without looking. I wanted to. I knew there was nothing there. But if I claimed there was a sensor issue and they found a bag or a box or some other physical object sitting back there, I'd look like I was too dumb to have just checked the back seat. I knew I had checked it. I had checked it 1,000 times. But I looked once more just to be sure. I explained my problem to the man at the counter. He typed some notes into his computer and said, "Gonna be a few hours until we can get you in." "That's fine," I said. "I'll wait." "You sure you don't have?" he began. I cut him off more emphatically than I intended. "There is nothing in the back seat. I have looked." All right," he said, raising his hands to placate me. "Just trying to save you some time in case." I went to look again after that. I really couldn't have stood being wrong at that point. It was empty. It was always empty. I knew every crevice of that back seat now. There was nothing there. I sat in the waiting room drinking coffee and playing on my phone. I was inexplicably nervous. I couldn't figure out why. It was just a sensor issue. They would find it and fix it. The problem would go away. It was crazy that I'd waited this long, that I'd let it get to me this much. Finally, they called me back up to the front. "Well, we can't find anything wrong with your car," the mechanic said. "What do you mean? There's absolutely nothing in the back seat. I have made very sure of that. Back seat's clean as a whistle, sure, but we can't get that warning to turn on, either. Not without someone in the back seat. It cuts on like it's supposed to with a person back there, but if it's just the driver, it doesn't show." My expression must have been somewhere between disbelief and rage. The mechanic took a step back. "Look, I'll come show you." I calmed myself and followed him out to the garage. He turned on the car while I watched through the window. He let it run for a moment, then turned it off. No message appeared. "See?" he said. "We can replace the part if you want, but since we can't find an issue, it's not going to be covered under warranty, and we've got to take the entire back seat out to do it, so there's going to be a decent labor fee." I ignored him and got into the car. I turned it on and then, with trepidation, turned it back off. For the first time in weeks, no warning appeared. The rush of relief I felt was incredible. I turned the car on and off again several more times. There was no message. The warning was gone. "You happy?" the mechanic asked. "Unbelievably," I said. He shrugged. "Wish they were all this easy." I drove home feeling like I was floating. I hadn't realized how much tension I had been carrying, or how much my car had begun to feel like a prison. The road was broad and open. The day was beautiful. I was free. In my peripheral vision, a light flickered. Something on the passenger side of the car had blinked out. A little orange light I could not remember ever having paid attention to before. I stared sharply at it now, trying to figure out what had been illuminated. It blinked briefly again, on just long enough for me to read it. Passenger airbag off. It stayed on whenever there was no one in the front passenger seat. It was off now. The final short blink could have been anything. It could have been an LED failing, a sensor breaking, any of 1,000 electrical glitches, or it could have been something settling itself into the passenger seat. I pulled over to the side of the road. I left the car running when I got out. I did not look back as I walked away. There was no point. I knew there was nothing in the back seat anymore. I never went back for the car. The police called a few days later. They'd found my vehicle, they said. Some kids had taken it out joyriding. It was in bad shape. So were the kids. They were reviewing the dash cam footage, but did I want a copy for my insurance? I shouldn't have watched it. I knew that before I ever put the thumb drive in my computer, but I had to know. They were laughing at first, whooping and hollering as they sped away, down the street, all clearly having fun at first. Pretty soon, though, one of them starts cautioning the driver to slow down. The panic starts then, screaming that the pedals won't work, the wheel won't turn, the doors won't open. All the while, the speed on the display is creeping higher and higher. It ends as you'd expect. I'm sure there'll be questions about why I left my car with the keys in it, whether I knew something was wrong. I suppose the clean bill of health I got from the dealership that day will be useful in proving my innocence. I'm not worried about that right now, though. My Ring doorbell is notifying me that there's someone on my front porch, but the camera shows nothing at all. In the 9th grade, my dad told us we were moving again. By then, we'd shuffled between half a dozen shitty apartments since our mom died. I knew things wouldn't be any different this time, but I didn't expect it to be worse. As soon as our car pulled up in front of the drab Victorian 3-story, my heart fell. "Is this all for us?" my little sister asked, eyes wide. I shushed her and shook my head. Any place we could afford was probably Section 8, but she didn't need to know that. No, I told her. Lots of other people live here too. I did my best to settle in, make us comfortable. The rooms were big, drafty things, with faded wallpaper that peeled at the seams. Our few belongings looked small and lonely inside them. Dad left us alone a lot. Sissy thought he was working, but I knew it was just as likely he was on a bender. I was always relieved when he left. When I saw his boots by the door, I knew to be quiet and careful. It was hard to sleep in, that place. Dogs barked all night, and the windows leaked cold air. The ceiling creaked when the upstairs neighbors walked around. Sometimes they yelled. I always kept our door locked. I would lay in bed at night with my sister next to me, shivering under the blankets, and I dreamed we were not alone. There was someone else in the room. I shut my eyes tight. My heart pounded. When I opened them, there was only darkness. I tried to control my breathing, told myself I made it up, or it was a nightmare. But my gut knew the truth, because this wasn't the first time I'd seen her. Since we'd moved into the house, I realized there was something worse than a drunken father. There was something that lurked in that place, creeping around the edges of my sight, something that had been there before us, something that lived there with us. My father never saw her, not even when I could see her almost plain as day, standing in the shadowy doorway while we ate dinner. A normal person would scream or run, but I didn't. I knew if I said something, Dad would beat me for being crazy, and Sissy would cry because we were fighting. So I did nothing. My spoon trembled as I brought it to my lips, but I would not draw attention to what I saw. But I wasn't the only one who saw her. A few days later, we were in the kitchen, making macaroni and cheese. It was just the two of us, but when I turned around, she had set the table for 3. "Daddy won't be home for dinner," I said. "It's just us." She popped into her seat, and I made her a bowl. "That's not for Dad," she said. "It's for the sad lady." I stared at her, fearful. She shrugged. "She probably gets hungry," Sissy said, as she took a bite. I was scared, but I didn't press the issue. I had other problems on my mind. Dad wasn't going to work so much now. He'd sit for hours in front of our grainy TV, not moving. The bad thing was that all the other rooms branched off the living room, and I had to creep past him to go to the kitchen, or the bathroom, or to leave. We were trapped. I wasn't sure what was worse, being there with him or being there without him. All I knew was that he grew more depressed by the day, and the trash clinked when I took it out. One evening a storm rolled in. The rain pelted the window in our room, making it impossible to focus on my homework. Dad sat in his chair in the living room while we holed up in our room. Sissy rolled on the floor, carefully coloring a sheet for school. There was a flash in the window and a distant boom, and then the house went dark. My dad yelled from his armchair, "Go downstairs and flip the breaker!" There was one place I never went in that house, the basement. We had an access door in our apartment to the stairwell. It was dark down there, dirty and damp. But mostly I didn't like going down there because of how it made me feel. It was claustrophobic and stuffy and oppressively silent, but it felt like someone was watching my every move. I slunk out of my bedroom, hurrying to obey before he threw something at me. I opened the door to the basement. It was pitch black. I reached back into the kitchen drawer and found a flashlight that cast a weak yellow beam, barely enough to see. I was halfway down the steps when I noticed the light reflecting on the basement floor. A sheen. The basement was flooded with water, but there was something else that made me stop. Sloshing. I stopped, frozen in place. I heard it again. I hadn't imagined it. I knew, dead in my heart, that she was down there. I couldn't take another step. My whole body trembled with adrenaline. I turned and ran up the stairs to the kitchen, slamming the door. But when I whirled around, I was face to face with my father. "Why is the power still off?" he asked me, softly. I gulped. "I don't know which switch to flip," I lied. "You'll have to do it." Irate, he pushed me aside and stomped down the stairs. He hated being inconvenienced. But I couldn't go down there, not with her. My chest tight, I prayed he wouldn't see her, couldn't see her, and I held my breath. But he didn't come back up, and the lights didn't come back on. There was silence. And then, a bang. Startled, my sister shrieked in the other room. I knew something terrible had happened, but I couldn't go down there. I cautiously picked up the phone and dialed 911. I don't know what I said, but I know I huddled with my sister until the ambulance arrived. I covered her eyes when they wheeled Dad's body out on the gurney. The paramedic told me it was the old, faulty wiring in the box that electrocuted him, but I don't believe it. I think she killed him to protect us.